This is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Shawnee Castile.
And I'm A.V. Scott, or A.V. Castile.
And I'm Doubtful Dylan.
We want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you are not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and for people committed to a life rooted in science and unfettered by supernatural beliefs.
For today's show, we're going to be discussing the road back to atheism.
Before we begin, we want to tell viewers about the show's sponsors.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville frequently has a fun meetup at a bar or eatery. The next meetup is Tuesday, 5:30 p.m. at West Hills Flats and Taps, 7403 Kingston Pike, Knoxville, Tennessee. For details, go to knoxvilleatheists.org. That's atheists with an S. When you go to the meetup, look for the silver-jacketed copy of the God Delusion standing upright on the table. And as Matt Dillahunty at Atheist Experience says, everyone is welcome to our happy hour for food, fun, drink, and conversation. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't.
The Rationalists of East Tennessee have several regular monthly meetings. See our website, rationalists.org, for details. The first and third Sunday mornings of the month are usually lectures with lively roundtable discussions. The second Sunday, we hold the Skeptics Book Club. On the fourth Sunday, we are mixing it up, sometimes with a potluck get-together in a member's home, which we call a reflections meeting.
So later in the show, we'll be giving you our websites for additional details, including the times and locations.
All right, and this week in the news.
On February 10th, 2018, celebrate Darwin Day with McClung Museum. The McClung Museum in Knoxville, along with graduate students from UT's Department of Earth and Planetary Sciences, will host a birthday celebration honoring Charles Darwin. The program will offer tours of the Human Origins Gallery, guided craft activities, cake and punch, music, scavenger hunts, and conversations with Darwin, an oversized puppet head. Visitors participating in the activities will be eligible for the raffle of 2 special prizes. For more information, please visit their website, mclungmuseum.utk.edu.
And Darwin Day is one of their longest running annual celebrations of Charles Darwin's scientific advances. Massimo Pigliucci, former assistant professor in the Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology, founded Darwin Day at UT in 1997. So this would be year 21.
Yeah.
I can do math sometimes. Oh my gosh. Now, in a little more disturbing news, Matthew Heimbach is planning a talk at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Heimbach is the co-founder of the Traditionalist Workers' Party, which is identified by the Southern Poverty Law Center as a white supremacist hate group. While the talk is titled Problems in Appalachia, From Opioid Addiction to Poverty, according to KnoxNews.com, the group misrepresented themselves when reserving space at the McClung Museum, reserving it under a local church's name. Shortly afterwards, they changed the contact information to someone that was out of state. Vice Chancellor of Communications Ryan Robinson expressed concern that the intent of the event was grossly misrepresented. The Traditionalist Worker Party frequently protests social justice events and promotes white supremacy and anti-Semitism. And Faithless Force says that we agree. Imagine having accomplished so little in life and nothing more to be proud of than your skin and where your mother was when you exited her womb. In other words, this makes me special, and where I was born makes me special, and that's all I have going for me. That's my entire identity. So that is kind of a disturbing thing going on in our local news.
Back to the good news, though. The Colorado Supreme Court has halted a voucher program in the Douglas County School District. Back in 2015, the Colorado Supreme Court deemed the program was in violation of the state's constitution because it gave public funds to religious schools. But in June of 2017, the Supreme Court requested that they revisit the issue. So in December, the newly elected school board voted to remove the program altogether. The Colorado Supreme Court has now deemed the issue moot at this point and will now revisit their decision. We want to say good work to Taxpayers for Public Education, the advocacy group that stopped the proposed theft of public funds by redirection to schools that may teach creationism and other anti-science ideas.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you so much for what you've done and the work that you do.
You know, personally, when I hear stuff like that in the news, where you know, tax funds are going to ideas that I just, you know, not necessarily ideas that I disagree with, but things that that seem like they're restrictive to other people's beliefs. Mm-hmm. You know, it's good to get some news like this once in a while.
Well, it's a clear-cut violation of not only the Colorado state constitution, but our U.S. Constitution. Public funds for religious groups is a promotion of one religious group over no religion or any other religions. So yeah, good job. And I do believe the Freedom from Religion Foundation got involved in this in October of 2017 as well.
Yeah.
Sending a letter to the court.
Right.
Now, on to our program. Today we're going to be discussing the road back to atheism. I like to call it the road back to atheism because we are never born with a religion. Religion is indoctrinated into us. It's something that is taught to us. We are all innately born without these belief systems. Now, according to the Atheist Census, which is a project by the Atheist Alliance International, the vast majority of nones, or those that do not adhere to religious belief systems, come from a religious background. While this is not surprising to many of us, the numbers can be quite staggering. Over 96,000 secular individuals have been polled by them in the United States.
65.7% identify as atheist, 9.1% as humanist, 6.9% as non-religious, 6% as agnostic, 5.7% as freethinker, 2.6% as rationalist, 1.7% as secularist, and 2.3% fall into the other category. While our self-identifications vary, they are still very much the same at the root. But what were our backgrounds? Were we all raised free from religious indoctrination?
The very plain answer to this is no. According to the Atheist Census, only 15.2% of non-theists in the U.S. came from no religious background. The remaining 84.8% can be broken down as follows: 51.5% Christianity, excluding Catholicism, 26.1% would be Catholicism, 2.7% Judaism, 0.4% Islam, 0.4% Hindu, 0.3% Buddhism, and then the other would be 3.5% for anything other than those listed.
Right, and while we're going ahead and talking about how people identify, we might want to talk about the difference between agnostic and Gnostic in some of these, between atheism and theism, I guess you could say. So, Avi, how would you identify?
I identify as agnostic, atheist, anti-theist.
Okay.
So I believe that there is no way that I can possibly know that there is or isn't a God. However, I do not follow one personally. I do not believe in, I would say, the traditional God. I don't believe in any of them. But I do not believe in religion, so anti-theist, I'm against religion and do not have any myself.
All right.
So.
And how about you, Dr. Dillon?
I personally identify as an agnostic atheist, and I think the reason for that is because I tend to take a very scientific look at belief. So, you know, I'm open to the idea of a God if there was evidence to support something like that, which personally I don't think there is. So identifying as an atheist comes pretty naturally. The agnostic part is to say, if evidence came about that there was a God, I would be open to changing my mind.
That's completely understandable. I personally identify as a Gnostic atheist. A Gnostic atheist, by definition, believes that there is evidence of no God. I like to specify that I believe there is no evidence there is evidence of no benevolent God. I cite the Holocaust, the Holy Wars, childhood poverty, all the suffering that's in the world. To me, that is evidence that there is no benevolent, all-powerful being. So we've covered the agnostic and the Gnostic atheists, but there are agnostic and Gnostic theists, and they follow the same lines. An agnostic theist does not believe that there's evidence for or against a God, but they do, however, believe in a God or gods. And the same line with a Gnostic theist. They believe that there is firm evidence for a God or gods, and they also believe in a God or gods. So that's just kind of a scale. It's not necessarily a black and white theist, atheist. Agnostic gets split up between both sides, and I think that's necessary for some clarification.
I think it's an important distinction, mostly just because, someone that's theist or atheist, for that matter, if they hear that the person that they're talking to is the opposite of what they are, so if an atheist comes across a theist or a theist comes across an atheist, it's easy to kind of group everybody up into one big camp, and it really, I think, kind of cheapens the idea of that person's beliefs, because, like you said previously, everyone kind of has this spectrum of belief that they fall on.
Right.
So, I think it's a very important distinction, especially citing everything that we've just talked about with the census. So.
Yeah, and I mean, everybody's a little bit different. Avi and I are sisters. I'm Gnostic. She's agnostic. We come from essentially the same background, but we do fall on the spectrum differently. So now, how did so many of us break free from the religious mindsets that we had been taught when we were younger? On today's show, we'll give you our deconversion stories. Each story is just as unique as the individual, and hopefully we'll hear some of your stories as well. Remember, this is a live call-in show, and your input is just as important as ours. You can find the number on the screen, 865-215-2288. And I'll go ahead and start a little bit with my story. I was raised in a very, very strict Old Testament style Christian home. My father was very, very patriarchal. The Bible was, specifically the Old Testament Bible, was pushed on us in every aspect of every day of our lives. Women shouldn't wear pants. Women shouldn't cut their hair. Women shouldn't wear makeup. Men are the head of the household. Women are unclean during their menstrual cycle and after their menstrual cycle. Just very, very Old Testament, firm in that. It led to a lot of misogyny in our house, a lot of abuse. But what really struck me, it never made sense to me. I had some real issues with, I think I recall my earliest question being around age 3. And it was like, well, who made God? But hold on real quick, we have a caller. Caller, do you have a name or nickname you'd like to go by?
Charles from Central Illinois.
Hello, Charles from Central Illinois. How are you today?
Cold.
Cold? We're cold too.
Yeah.
You're probably colder than
It's
us.
sunny here. Hold on one moment.
Okay.
Bloody train is coming. Got to get inside.
Okay. So you can hear us and we can hear you.
Yes, I can hear you quite well. The screen is working quite well.
All right, great. So did you have
Now, about this returning to atheism. Okay. One of the complex problems is how many people misidentify atheism with something else. Okay? That's one of Neil deGrasse Tyson's understanding, is that it denies the possibility of anything that would resemble what some people call the divine. But then you start getting complex problems with the word definition of divine.
What would be?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
What would be the definition that you would go by with divine?
That which does not correspond with how the universe actually functions.
Okay.
On Richard Dawkins' scale, I'm a very strong 6.
So essentially, you're saying your definition would be something that an occurrence that happens outside of what we consider the realm of possibility?
Outside of the possibility of actually occurring, because it'd be like it adding energy,
Okay.
thermal energy, to a pot of non-boiling water, and it's suddenly turning into ice. Okay? That,
Okay.
I would think of would be some kind of supernatural event.
Right. Yeah, and I think,
So,
a lot of the majority of people that fall into these categories, they just do not put worth to supernatural events. When there is something that many would consider a supernatural event, there's an explanation for it. Possibly we haven't found it yet, or maybe we're just misinformed on what it is.
yes. For instance, for many, many, many years, millennia, people thought it was because you were immoral is the reason you got diseases. And it turned out to be things like viruses, bacteria, and germs. When you point this out to the very strongly motivated theists, they point out, well, that's why the germs were hurting you and so forth, is because you were immoral. But
Right,
the
which,
germs don't know what a moral is. They're non-sentient. They don't have literature. They don't have music. They don't have big bands playing swing music or anything like that. So how could a germ decide who isn't immoral?
right. Just real quick to go back, you said you're a number 6 on the Dawkins scale.
Yes.
Would you like to elaborate for some of our viewers what the Dawkins scale is? I know some of us know it, some of us don't.
Professor Richard Dawkins came up with a scale 1 through 7 on a number line on what your religious beliefs were. Number 1 being absolutely certain and knowing that God exists, and number 7, absolutely certain and knowing that God does not exist. One of the problems with a lot of people is they mix up the term God, the generic term, for the word God, their specific God of their belief. So, with this problem in mind, every time somebody says, "What about God?" I keep wanting to ask them which one.
Right.
There's been tens of millions of gods we've worshipped over the last, 100,000 years or so?
Easily.
So whenever you say the generic term God, extremely intense religious people always think you're saying their God.
You're right. Well, because there is no other God to them, and there couldn't possibly be, and people can't have other beliefs.
I think we're touching a lot on like the individuality of belief this show, and so I think it's kind of interesting because everybody has that different definition of what God is, right? So it seems to me that it's really up to the individual, what they identify as. Would you
The
agree?
problem with that is that we are a social species. And once
Sure.
you get a dominant character running a social group, you get somebody like, that crazy group that went down to French Guiana and committed suicide in mass. He knew what God wanted 100%. He was talking into him in his head.
Right.
So how you define God is very important in many regards, especially when you have a highly powered, highly charismatic, dominant personality running a group. We've got the movie Waco coming out about that.
Oh, is there a movie coming out about Waco?
Yes.
I had not heard that. That should be interesting.
We'll all probably be in attendance.
Right. Yeah, and when you're going into that, we're talking a little about cults. But as far as I'm concerned, the only difference between a cult and religion is the number of followers. To me, they're all cult-like
Some
in
people,
nature.
some people might say the difference is whether or not the leader is dead.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Well,
Everybody's.
there is that slight problem out about the Jewish militia, whose supposed founder was God incarnate, who reportedly assumed into heaven. The guys that were shooting at everybody in the Mideast back in the 80s and 90s.
Mm-hmm.
So if you tell that, start bringing up a concept like that to them, they start shooting at you. So
Right.
once again, back to the problem of what person believes are in a God.
Mm-hmm. I mean, when they have such a firm belief in divinity and the supernatural as well, and they've got it in their mind that they're right and everyone else is wrong, they've lost their humanism, they've lost their ability to empathize with other people, and it's, you're going to believe the way I believe, or you're going to die.
Working for the evil incarnate or Antichrist and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, belief in what God is and isn't impacts whether or not the concept of what your concept of atheism is and isn't.
Right. Go ahead, Ivy.
I was just going to say that's also it comes from based on everybody's different experiences. Just to
Exactly.
elaborate on what you were saying, like Shawnee was saying earlier, we have pretty much the same background, but we believe something differently.
Mm-hmm.
And my experiences have led me to believe certain things that she doesn't. So.
Yeah. Charles, did you have a deconversion story you wanted to share?
My deconversion started on the day when I was 11, watching a little black and white, 19-inch black and white Admiral TV, and heard the words, "Houston, this is Tranquility Base. The Eagle has landed."
Oh, that just gave me chills.
Yeah.
It took me, a good almost 10 years to figure out that I had become an atheist.
But that was kind of your defining moment where it was, you knew everything was a little bit different than what you'd been told.
That if what all the little religions in the world, any of them, said was true, that moment never happened.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Which I find really, really hard to believe.
Well, some people think the moon landing was faked.
I've heard that.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Like they were in a little studio and,
Some people also think
Right
that
there with,
electricity's the devil.
Chemtrails and the birther movement and the reptilians are controlling the members of the Republican Party, including former President Bush, too. And I keep wondering what kind of mushrooms these people are having in their morning.
And where can we get some? All right. Well,
Okay. I'll let you
She
all
was
go.
just kidding, by the
Like
way.
my callers.
We don't want to know where to get them. Don't call in for that.
Thank you, Charles. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
So, Shawnee, would you like to continue with your deconversion story?
Yeah. So I
Unless
guess
we have another caller.
My earliest memory of questioning what I was being taught was I was around 3 years old, I believe in Sunday school. And Sunday school did not like me because we went to a different church than what my dad taught. My mom's side was very Baptist. But I kept asking, who made God? but who made God? And I was not allowed to talk in Sunday school anymore. So continued, throughout the years, it was just always in the back of my mind, like, none of this makes sense. None of this makes sense. And as I said, the Bible was pretty much, drilled into us. And I would have to sit there and read it. And you start at Genesis and you read it through. And I'm like, this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. I can remember at 9 years old standing in my bedroom going, because I had been taught that the ultimate sin was to denounce Jesus Christ. And I stood in my bedroom and I balled up my little fist and I said, you're not real. And then I continued to pretend, and I call it fake it till you make it. Going into middle school, high school, being in East Tennessee, everyone is religious. Everyone is Christian. But one thing that did happen is my mother came out as an atheist when I was 12. And she has a very, very interesting deconversion story as well, which if we have time, I'll share that. But in high school, dated a guy he went to church all the time. So I went and did the church thing and got drunk with the church kids and all that. And
So
then
relatable.
in the back of my mind, it's still, this isn't right. This isn't right. None of this makes sense. I went through, hold on, we actually have another caller.
Hey, Eddie,
Hi, caller. Do you have a name or a nickname you'd like for us to call you?
Alan.
Alice?
Yes.
Hi, Alice. Did you have a question or comment for us?
Well, I was just interested.
Interested in the deconversion stories?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you watched our show before?
Yes, I did, and I think you're all going to go to hell.
Okay, we appreciate that. Thank you, Alice.
Okay. Did you have? She's hung
You
up
knew
on
that
us.
was going to happen as soon as she said that. So anywho, since that lovely
That's okay.
game. So
Spreading
as I got a
So,
little bit older,
yeah.
I went through a period of spreading the love.
Can't make it up.
I went through a period of paganism because I'm like, okay, I don't believe in this biblical God. I don't believe in the Old Testament or the New Testament God because those two do not get along. They're like completely different people. And an all-powerful and omniscient God changes his mind. So I went through paganism because there's still this, it's been pushed into you, there's this religion and this supernatural. I went through that period and still it's like, this is all a bunch of bull. Then I guess about the time I was 26, and this was after the internet and MySpace and Facebook, and we got to talk to other people that felt the same way we did and had questions themselves. I finally just came out and I'm like, I'm an atheist. I don't believe this stuff. I've never really believed it. And I've not gone back since. So I think I've done enough talking about mine. So Dylan, your deconversion
Yes, ma'am.
story. What is your religious background, if you had any?
Well, so I started out. So my family is Baptist, still are. That's why I'm Doubtful Dylan and not my real name. So my family is extremely religious. It's always been kind of that's the way it is. That's the way you're supposed to be. And I was raised in the church thinking the same way, right up until middle school. Right. So my deconversion starts with a middle school book report. Right. So we were doing a book report. About maybe not a book report, but it was about a play that I can't remember the name of right now, covering the Scopes trial in a fictionalized kind of thing, right? And for those that aren't familiar with the Scopes trial, it was it was a trial where a science teacher had been teaching evolution in schools, and the state of Tennessee tried to convict him for it, citing that it was against the law to teach evolution in schools. Well, his defense lawyers ended up making an argument that essentially asked, okay, well, if he's teaching evolution in schools, why doesn't that mean that he's still abiding by religious teachings? Does that make sense? So, essentially, what I took away from all that was Well, believing in evolution doesn't mean that I have to, completely convert to atheism or stop believing in God. And so I still had a very personal relationship with God throughout, most of my adolescent life. I had just kind of shifted my beliefs and started saying, okay, well, I'm a theist that believes in evolution. But what really bugged me about that was that, I was still going to church and talking to the pastor and my youth minister and all these different people. And I would ask these questions that came to mind as I started to question more and more about what I had been told in the church. And consistently in the Baptist church, the answer was always, well, we just don't believe that. It's always the same thing, or it was in my experience. There just weren't answers, It's just, this is the way it's supposed to be, and if you believe anything else, you're wrong. And, enough questions being unanswered led me to come to my own conclusions. And I think I started calling myself an atheist and actually going by that nomenclature probably my freshman or sophomore year of college. So that would have been, probably the course of about 6 or 7 years. But like you said, I pulled back the veil, and now I can't go back.
So would you say before this book report on the Scopes trial that you were a pretty strong believer?
Oh, absolutely.
Like probably a Gnostic theist?
I kept a Bible in my backpack.
Nice.
Yeah, I was really into it, went to all the church events that I could. My entire life was in the church, and just after that was like the initial question. It was the catalyst.
Yeah, out of curiosity, and I find this interesting because I ask this question often on the internet. Do you ever catch yourself subconsciously going through these rituals that you were taught, like praying?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's really the same anymore. Like, it's, it used to be I'm sending my thoughts to God. But now it's more like I'm sending my thoughts to myself. Like, I have to kind of... It's like talking to myself, like I'm my own God in
there
my
you go.
own head.
And I guess you could call that a form of ritualistic meditation.
Yeah, something like that.
Now, do you find since you have become atheist, do you have more secular or religious friends and family?
I would say that I have a healthy mix of both. I've probably met more secular people just because of my involvement in things like Atheist Society of Knoxville. But most people don't even ask, If it comes up, I'm happy to tell people, but, that's never...
You don't walk up and say,
it's
"Hi,
never
my
a
name's Bill and I'm an
barrier.
atheist."
Yeah, it's never a barrier for communication between two people.
Right.
And most of the people that I'm friends with would agree.
All right. Avi,
Yes, ma'am.
what's your religious background?
Okay, so I was raised in the same household as Shawnee, and our father used the Bible as a form of control. I remember, I'm not sure the age, I think it was single digits, but my father would have us call into this line that had hell on the other end.
I had forgotten about
And so you can hear screaming and people burning alive, and it scared the living bejesus out of me. I mean, all of us.
Literally?
It was
Scared the Jesus out of you?
scared the devil out of me. Because apparently I was a redheaded, evil stepchild. But I remember that was pretty scary. Like, he kind of used the Bible as just that scare factor, do this or you're going to hell, or, but then he would teach us about this loving God. And, I remember having a lot of questions as a child, and my father said, never ask questions.
Yes.
Never question it. You just do what you're supposed to do, period. And if the Bible, with him, I like to call him a hypocristian because he would preach, love and this and that, and he was very abusive, verbally, emotionally. The patriarchy was in full effect in our house. He is very misogynistic. He always behaved in a way that women were underneath men, and he used the Bible as
justification.
As justification.
I actually do say that sometimes I think that the only reason he is a Christian is to justify his misogyny, because he can use the Bible for it.
However, on the flip side, our mother's side of the family are mostly all Christian, and are very kind. We still had a good example of people who were Christian and were very helpful, very kind. It wasn't just that one way that we saw. So that wasn't exactly why I moved away from religion. But I do remember, him saying, "Don't question it." And so throughout most of my life, my head was stuck in the sand. I was just going, through the motions. And I was about 31, so about 4 years ago, I remember I was in my kitchen, and I had stopped praying like probably 6 years prior, but I still kind of held I just actually wouldn't come out and say, what I believe, or,
And real briefly, we have another caller. Caller, do you have a name or nickname you would like for us to call you?
Casey.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Casey.
Tracy?
Casey.
Casey,
Hello,
I'm sorry.
Casey.
Hi, thank you. I found it really interesting earlier in the show when you were talking about the traditionalist Workers' Party, let's just call them what they are, Nazis that are coming to UT, or
Yes.
trying to come to UT. And I just found it very interesting that your group, I guess for lack of a better term, I don't want to say faith or religion or whatever, but you're speaking out against it.
Yes.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't seen any faith groups that I'm aware of locally that have spoken out against it or planned a counter demonstration or whatever the case is. And I just find that very telling in today's political climate and today's society that they're not speaking out. And as we saw, I think last year with the current occupant in the White House who saying that there's very fine people on both sides. I mean, it's very much a dog whistle to that type of or a shout out, I guess, or a dog whistle to his followers. And another good point that I really appreciated you making was the whole idea of being proud of your where you happen to be when your mother gave birth. I've never quite understood that myself when people say, well, I'm proud to be from XXX, or I'm proud to be from this state or this county. I mean, you didn't really have any control over what zip code your mother was in when she gave birth, so I never quite understood that either. But I just really appreciate the fact that you are speaking out against it. I'm not seeing any sort of other faiths or houses of worship speaking out against that. You would think it would be something that would be everybody could be united against, because it's just pure hate, whether you are a believer or not a believer, whatever. I mean, it just seems kind of common sense to me that you should be able to, or all groups should be able to come out and band together to speak against that. And another thing, and I'm not sure who said it because there seems to be some confusion on it, but somebody once said that when fascism comes to this country, it's going to be wrapped in a flag and carrying a cross. And I think we're seeing that now because of all the things that are going on in our world and our daily barrage of the man I like to refer to as Cheeto Jesus.
That's a good one.
I actually stole that from Rick Wilson, who's a GOP strategist, but I think it holds true. Just as an example, and then I'll get off the air. But my youngest child is 5. We signed him up for soccer, and we went through Upward Bound, which I knew full well that it was. I knew the idea of Upward Bound, that everybody plays and it's Christian based, and that they, there's a little devotional at halftime and all that, and that's fine. I mean, I knew that going in. But I mean, as the season wore on, there was this one guy, I think he was like the lead pastor, got on the field and started with, he was close to Thanksgiving, and he was saying, well, Thanksgiving's coming up, and I'm thankful for this. And somehow it segued away into the NFL players who are taking the knee for the flag, and how his daddy didn't fight the Nazis for that. First of all, what does this have to do with soccer? What does this have to do with Christianity? And so it's just a really, it's a really telling thing, I think, when your group, the Freethought group, the Atheist group, is speaking out against essentially fascism and hatred, and I just don't see people of faith doing it openly, or at least united. So I just wanted to say that. I wanted to thank you for opening with that at the top of your show, and I appreciate the time, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you for calling in. Have you watched us before? He's
we
gone.
lost Casey.
That's all right. Thank you, Casey.
All right, real quick, we're going to have to cut over to our break. So in case you are just tuning in, this is the Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by them and by individual contributions. We want to thank DW for substantially funding this particular show. We have moved. This is our new regular time. Every Wednesday from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern on Knoxville Community Access Television, channel 6, 12, 99, or 193, depending on your local cable network. Tell your out-of-town friends they can see us streaming online at ctvknox.org.
And today's show is live. Today is February the 7th, and you can call in on the number on our screen and speak with us. While we take a short break, please watch these informative videos from our sponsors.
Do you find stories of talking snakes laughable? Do you prefer the scientific method over supernatural beliefs? Are you concerned about religious leaders and organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalists of East Tennessee meets for fellowship and provides a forum for people who support skeptical thinking and rational discussion of these and other issues. To find out more information or to find out about our next meeting, visit us on the web at www.rationalist.org. If you live in or around the Knoxville area and are questioning your religious beliefs or simply believe in one less God than everyone else, well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville, or ASK, meets one or more times a week. We have evening meetups for fun, food, drink, and conversation. Find us online at KnoxvilleAtheists, with an S at the end, .org. The purpose of the ASK is to supply a venue for community, camaraderie, and outreach to atheists, agnostics, freethinkers, and other like-minded persons in the East Tennessee area. Our regular Tuesday meeting is at 5:30 p.m. at Flats and Taps, 7403 Kingston Pike, Knoxville, Tennessee, 37919.
And for you readers out there, the RET Skeptics Book Club meets on the second Sunday of the month. The book for February is A Colony in a Nation, which is by Chris Hayes. The meeting is from 2 to 4 p.m. The location is Books A Million, which is at 8513 Kingston Pike, Knoxville. You need not to have read the book to attend, but of course that helps.
The third Sunday of February, Mr. Eddie Young, Executive Director of the East Tennessee Peace and Justice Center, will present a talk titled The Criminalization of the Homeless. The center's work is focused on organizing, training, and mobilizing the homeless in the pursuit of peace through social justice.
Please see rationalists.org for program or meeting times and locations and a list of future books. And now back to the program. When we left off, Avi, you were discussing that you had stopped praying.
Mm-hmm. And so about 4 years ago, I was standing in my kitchen and I was just thinking about things, trying to separate what I've been told to believe in to what I actually believe in. And I didn't know the answer at that point. You were going through your whole journey, and that actually gave me kind of the push to kind of look in myself and see, what I actually believe. And so I was actually in college, and I was taking a philosophy class. And I remember on the first day of that class, he said to us, our professor said to us, we're used to saying what team do you like, or where are you from, or what do you like to do, instead of why. When you ask the question, why do you believe it? We're all like, I don't know, my mama told me, I don't know why I believe in God. So I started asking myself that question all the time. I still do it. Why? Why do you believe this way? And so I went and got a Bible in a box somewhere, and I started reading Revelations. And right there for me was just, why do I believe in this? It just seemed to be a huge contradiction, the whole Bible. He's supposed to be, the deity, God, is supposed to be, all-knowing, loving, and this and that, and Revelations, that just blows it out of the water. And then also, I started thinking about Noah's Ark. We were told as young children this is a good story, and I started thinking, if that actually happened, this deity killed innocent children, animals, because they only took 2 by 2. But what's interesting is he took 2 lions. I'm not sure what they were supposed to do. And
have you ever thought about how do you feed the lions?
2 lions. They can't.
Well, no. What you're referring to is the children's book where it's the drawing is 2 male lions.
Yes.
And they're walking up into the ark, and it's like.
I'm
How?
pretty sure.
And so the pieces of the puzzle
They can't
start
make
falling
babies
into
that
place. I've always thought, well, how do they feed the lions? They must have had more than 2 of all the other animals.
I'm sure God just kept plenty of fish.
No, God made them peaceful, and they were all vegetarians, and that's how they survived on that ark with all of these animals 2 by 2.
That's a lot of salads.
And where are you going to get all these grains? Because everything's covered in water.
But no, continue with your story.
Yeah, so it just started with that one question, why, and I just started, rethinking, everything that I've been told. I just started thinking for myself. That was it. That was.
I think it's interesting that a lot of these deconversion stories, it's not like a light bulb moment. It's not one of these moments. We can all kind of name a point in our lives where we saw, maybe I need to start thinking about this a little bit more. But it's all very gradual. Most people that I know that have converted to atheism or agnosticism from a religious background say that it started with questions.
Yes, absolutely.
And so I think that's why a lot of the people here do what they do, because we want to encourage people to do the same thing, just to think for yourself.
That's
And that's regardless of whatever your beliefs happen to be.
And like your philosophy teacher said, why? Why do I believe this? Don't just blindly follow what you've been told on any end of the spectrum, in the middle, whatever. Ask the why. Ask some questions yourself. Do some research yourself. I think that's how all of us or the majority of us came to where we're at if we came from any type of religious background, is, asking questions, asking the why. Don't take what somebody says as the gospel truth. And yeah, that is something I've noticed, is it's questions, asking questions. Now, Avi, do you ever catch yourself subconsciously going through those rituals that were ingrained in you?
Well, one major thing that was hard to let go that I've been actively doing for about, okay, so we have a caller?
Yes, we have a caller.
Okay.
Hey,
Hello, caller.
Hello.
Can you give us a name or nickname?
Caller will work just fine.
Okay.
I'll know who you're talking to.
Okay.
Okay. Do you have
I'm just wanting to say I laughed out loud a moment ago because you were talking about the lions going up into the ark and it would be two males. And just as you said that, I remembered seeing those pictures.
Right.
And I thought, it's okay, this God is silly. This doesn't work that way, or he's promoting some kind of lifestyle that maybe is now not so in vogue.
Well, it's just, this is how they're teaching children. This is how they're indoctrinating children, is these cute little cartoons. But the cartoons don't even make sense.
Well, now that's one of the things I have a suggestion here, because so often you atheists confuse me a little bit with when you say you're an atheist, then it seems like there's a paragraph or two explanation of what the atheist is, with overtones of agnostic and gnostic theism and all of that sort of thing. And I do believe it may confuse some of the people, such as Alice, who called in and gave you her prediction for your future. And she probably did that in a loving manner. But what I was hoping...
Yeah, that seems very, very loving, no matter which way you believe.
I see. Perhaps you
I
did
mean,
not,
to tell someone,
catch the sarcasm in my voice.
Okay.
No, I caught it.
So,
I'm just clarifying for the callers that that's not what we would consider in any way loving.
so with that being said, I'm curious, do you think that Alice would have had a similar explanation after she had told us her beliefs? Do you think she would have had a couple paragraphs, or would it have been one sentence answer, that's it, there ain't nothing else?
I'm not too sure I understand your question, because I was speaking over part of it.
So if we had gotten Alice to stay on the line with us and have a conversation with us, do you think when we asked her about her beliefs, do you think she would have had a 2-paragraph explanation afterwards, like all us atheists? Or would
no, I believe she would probably have said, I'm a Christian, period.
But would she,
in other
if
words,
you
she
asked
would
her
have been,
why?
She would have been much more succinct in what she had to say. She probably would not go into a big, long differentiation between her and the Mormons and the Catholics and so forth. And she'd just say, I'm a Christian, or I'm a true believer, or something like that. Something very short and very easy to remember, whereas you people confuse others. For the example you said.
So my question to that would be, do you think that that's a sign, right? Do you think that that's a sign that she would have such a short and sweet, maybe not sweet, but such a short explanation of her belief?
Well, it's less tedious.
Yeah. Well, it's less tedious to say agnostic atheist too, right?
Well, yeah, but then you have to go and explain, what atheism means and so forth and so on. It used to mean I don't believe in a God, period.
Right.
And
It still
now
means I don't believe in a God.
I see no evidence of a God, or I haven't been proven it, and so forth and so on.
Well, the very basic definition of atheist is lack of a belief in a deity. Breaking it down into agnostic and Gnostic goes more into the Dawkins scale. You can still refer to yourself
and
as
I believe
just
that
basic
you're kind
atheist.
of supporting what I'm saying.
Yes.
It's a long, drawn-out deal, which is why I have a suggestion for you.
What's that?
Okay. Now, for somebody like Alice, it doesn't really matter if you believe in other gods, what really matters is you don't believe in hers.
Right.
Now, if you are a Catholic, she probably has a little less animosity toward you. Or maybe she would have less animosity for you if you're a Muslim, even though she thinks that they're probably bound for the same place that you are. But if you wanted to get on an even keel with somebody, the fellow that called in about I believe it was the behavior of Christians in today's political atmosphere. For example, one of the televangelists think that, if I got the story right, thought that Mr. Trump should be given a mulligan for the encounters with porno stars. And I've never heard of anyone who was in a porno that was not a star. That confuses me too. But so if when you're dealing with Christians, and I doubt that you have a problem with somebody that just prays in their own home and lives their lives and doesn't bother you.
Absolutely.
I think your problem is the Christians that want to force their belief on you.
Anyone.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Not just the Christians.
Yeah.
Right now, Christianity seems to be a prevalent thing in the U.S. With the rise of, I'll say, conservative, conservative government.
Right.
But I think that most of us would say we oppose like anyone doing that.
Right.
Any
Right.
religious
You might
group.
oppose
even
Christianity
atheists.
being-
Even atheists. I don't think that it's constitutional
Right.
to push beliefs like that on people
I completely-
and try to break down that wall between churches and state.
I'm completely against the government controlling a church, as long as they're not harming children. Of course, the basics there.
Right.
But
So
yeah,
if
to
you're-
tell a
if you're
church
not a
that they
Christian,
can't be
more than
here.
If you're not a Christian, more than likely you're not going to get elected to many offices in America. And you talked about indoctrinating children, and that's what I thought of when I saw the Super Bowl. And after the Super Bowl, several of the athletes will, explain that it was their belief in God and everything that brought them to that point. Whereas the losing people, I didn't hear them saying something like, well, Jesus let us down in the third quarter. Anything like that. So here you have athletes. Maybe if I'm going to be an athlete, perhaps I need to be more demonstrative about Jesus. But this sort of behavior, if you could just get your atheist part down to, say, when you're talking to someone, say, I'm an atheist, and they say, well, what's that? And then you say, well, what faith are you? And then they say, well, I'm Christian. Then you just reply, I think you're full of baloney.
That's a very valid point. So I think that's probably.
Then you're on a one-to-one type thing with them, and you're not trying to explain to them the esoteric science that you know so well.
Sure. It's probably something to look into. So how did you find our show?
I've listened from time to time. I always tune in because Charles has something wonderful to say, and that's my favorite part.
All right. Thank you, caller. We really appreciate it. I hate to cut you short, but it is time for us to start wrapping things up. Didn't even get to finish Avi's conversion story, but there'll be another. Get out your pen and paper. This has been a Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee.
You can give us feedback by emailing us at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com or on our Facebook page, Freethought Forum Knoxville.
You and your friends can see the show on Wednesday evenings from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on this Knoxville station and online at ctvknox.org.
And we would like to thank Sam Riv and Faithless for our technical support, and the staff of CTV Knox, all of our viewers, and especially all of the callers.
Nuns, those who identify with no religion, are the fastest growing religious groups in America. Right here in East Tennessee, the Atheist